Well, North Carolina Republicans are facing a huge uphill battle in the 2026 midterms, specifically the 2026 Senate elections. Now, we know that incumbent Senator Thom Tillis is up for re-election, and midterms for president typically are not the best for the party. And for the U.S. House in 2026, it's fair to say that Republicans I'm going to emphasize on could lose the House in 2026. But for the Senate, that is a completely different story. Republicans are poised to maintain control of the Senate and possibly expand their majority in the Senate. The Democrats are left defending four vulnerable seats. Meanwhile, the GOP is defending one, maybe two seats in the 2026 Senate elections in 2026 with plenty of opportunity to pick up races. But today, we are going to focus on the very vulnerable state of North Carolina in the 2026 Senate elections. Now, like we said, Thom Tillis, the incumbent senator, is up for re-election. Tillis, who was initially elected back in 2014, beat out incumbent Senator Kay Hagan by roughly about 50,000 votes. He went on to, and granted, remember, 2020 or 2014 was a really good year for Republicans. You saw Republicans sweep the map up and down. Look at the House elections in 2014. Look at this. Some huge sweeps across the country. Republicans took a, 247 seat majority. Meanwhile, in the Senate, they picked up a number of seats. They picked up, places like Iowa, Colorado, Alaska, Louisiana, and North Carolina, which brought the Republicans to a majority of 54 seats in the Senate, really putting a stop to President Obama's last 2 years in office. And like we said, there are a number of races that just aren't competitive going into this election. Places like Texas, places like Florida, Colorado, Oregon, just not competitive. But these are where the competitive races are. You're looking at places like Minnesota, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, New Hampshire, and Maine. Some people like to throw out potentially Ohio or Florida as competitive races. Obviously, John Husted, who was appointed to fill J.D. Vance's seat when he became vice president. I'm not very worried about that at all. Could this be a race within 5 points? Sure. I think you could make that argument. Florida, not worried. Ashley Moody, she's the former attorney general there. I'm not worried about her winning in an electoral victory in the state of Florida, especially now. Even in a midterm, I'm not very worried about it right now. And there are a number of factors that are going to go into how this race specifically plays out. Because granted, this isn't the whole map. This is not representative of the whole country. This is representative of a few pockets that actually, the last two presidential elections have had huge representation. Places like Georgia, which has been a swing state for the last 12 years. Places like North Carolina, places like Michigan. If you remember, North Carolina, Barack Obama won North Carolina. Let's go back to 2008. Look at this. He flipped North Carolina barely, but he won the state of North Carolina. Look at this. Look at all of these different counties that Barack Obama flipped and was somehow able to squeak by with less than a half a percentage point victory in the state. But granted, he won the state. Fast forward to 2024. This has been it's been a lean Republican state at the presidential level, voting for Trump by 3 points. Back in 2016, it was almost 4 points. 2020, it was closer, 1.5 points. It was the one of the 7 swing states that Trump won in 2024 that didn't vote for Biden in 2020. And like we said, there's a lot of factors that are going to go into us. The big ones are going to be President Trump's actions. What is he able to do? Is he able to get his domestic spending agenda passed through the reconciliation process? Is President Trump and his administration able to negotiate trade deals with other countries to the point where we can take tariffs off their products? Is the United States able to reach a deal when it comes to trade with China? Obviously, we want to make a deal with China because we cannot afford to go to a full-fledged trade war. Because we do not have the operational capacity in the United States to pick up the slack if China were to just cut us off from, let's say, rare earth minerals or certain elements that go into our pharmaceutical products or electronics. We couldn't survive if they just cut us off. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do everything we can to reshore manufacturing in the United States. But it has to be much more gradual. I think Trump gave him a big sucker punch, but I think realistically, to mitigate, to still be able to win elections, I think it needs to be a much more gradual process. And hey, I think it can get faster. Let's start by deregulating. We want to be able to build rare earth mineral processing facilities in the United States, and it doesn't take 30 years to do it. Let's deregulate. Let's get the government out of the way of private industry. Maybe through certain tax policy, we try and induce companies to do this, but get out of the way after that. Get out of the way. If we reduce corporate taxes on manufacturers that build things in America to 15%, that's going to be a big competitive advantage to make your product in the U.S. But ultimately, what Trump is trying to do could hurt. There could be some temporary pain. But I think Trump can, although we're going to have some temporary pain from it, I think he can couple that with heavy deregulation plus tax breaks for corporations that are going to allow them to invest more money in the United States. You need to couple it with some medication almost, where the U.S. economy is still going to feel good. This isn't going to cripple the economy. And ultimately, the direction of the country. How do Americans feel and how energized are they to get out and vote for Trump? Because we know Trump, when he's on the ballot, he energizes people to get out and vote for him. But at the same time, when he's in office, he energizes a lot of Democrats to get out and vote against him. Huge, huge, huge. But so there's a lot of factors that are going to go into how this race is going to turn out. But we know, like we said, Tillis won back in 2014, 50,000 votes, ran a pretty tight election in 2020. And I'm just going to I just want to take a look at one thing right here. So some polling. Oh, and that was in the primary. Let's get to look at this. So Tillis ran significantly behind Cal Cunningham in the 2024 election in North Carolina. You had 5 of these prediction services saying that this was going to be a flip seat for the Democrats. Well, the other 4 said it was a toss-up. Look at this. Look, the average polling from the aggregators 270 to win in Real Clear Politics had Tillis down anywhere from 2.5 to 3 points. Look at this. I bet you can probably count on between 1 or 2 hands the amount of polls that showed Tillis winning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. So let's just be honest about this for just 1 second. Tillis ran pretty significantly behind his competitor in Poland in 2020, but at the end of the day, he was still able to squeak out a victory. I think Republicans came home. They came home to Tillis. They knew that what was going to happen. They knew they couldn't let a Democrat win this seat. And so they came home for Tillis. And I think that's going to be a big part of what we're going to see in 2024. Because it's going to be a very tight election for Thom Tillis. We know that the Republican Party has censured him, I believe, once or twice when it comes to gun control and same-sex marriage. I personally, and I'm sure you've heard me talk about this before, I think this is my issue with a lot of more establishment Republicans. It's where they break with the party. Look, if you're an establishment Republican, it means you're still agreeing with my policy prescriptions 85% of the time. My issue is when you decide to break. If you decide to break, okay, like Susan Collins on abortion in Maine, okay, that just makes sense. Abortion is heavily supported in Maine. Although, am I personally against it? Do I personally think it's horrible? Do I think you're killing an innocent human being at the end of the day? Absolutely. But it's a competitive decision to make sure that you can win this election, because on the alternative, the flip side, Collins does not have the seat, and the Democrats control it. So she's broken strategically, and there's been some things when it comes to tariffs on Canada that she's broke strategically, which I agree with. But then when it came to Thom Tillis in North Carolina, he decided to break with President Trump or the Republican Party, I should say, when it came to immigration in 2024. This is my big issue I had with him. He decided to break with the Republican Party, calling for a bipartisan legislation to secure our border. He supported a bipartisan bill that would have, quote unquote, secured our border, but it also would have given amnesty to basically all of the illegal migrants that were in the country as of now. which totally unacceptable. Under no certain look, there's some places where you can be pragmatic. You have to be able to make a deal at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, amnesty cannot be on the table. Mass amnesty cannot be on the table for the 10 to 20 million illegal migrants that Joe Biden let into this country. And we found out really quickly, all we needed was a new president. That's all we needed. We didn't need legislation. We didn't need anything. We needed a new president. It really is just as simple as that. And because you can see right here, look at this. In March, or I think this is, March of 2025, border crossings came to the lowest point they have been in years. Let's see, 2015. I wonder when it was even this close. My gosh, look at this. Trump leaves office right about what? Here? This is Biden. This is all Biden. And then somehow this is Trump. We didn't need legislation. We didn't. We simply needed a new president who's going to put the pressure on Mexico to continue doing what they were doing during the first Trump administration, allowing the Remain in Mexico policies, securing their northern border with the United States and securing their southern border of Mexico. Stop facilitating these migrant caravans that come from South America that make their way up through Mexico. Stop facilitating it. It's just as simple as that. And that's my big issue that I have with Thom Tillis. That is my big issue that I have, is when he decides to break with the party, where is it? I think there's some strategic moves you can make to break with the party or to break with President Trump, and I think they're called for. There are plenty of strategic moves, especially when you talk about annexing Canada. Canada's the 51st state, and tariffing the hell out of Canada like they're Mexico. I don't agree with that, and I think that's a strategic place to break with the party. But he didn't break in a strategic way. So you want to couple that with the fact that Roy Cooper is most likely going to jump in this race. Now, we know Wiley Nickel. He worked on the Al Gore campaign. He's part of Al Gore's radical climate initiatives, that all of Florida was going to be underwater by 2004 if we didn't elect, Al Gore in 2000. And he ended up running, he was a state senator, I believe, and then he was elected in the 13th, after redistricting, was elected to North Carolina's 13th congressional district for a year. Now it's running for the Senate. We also know that Roy Cooper, the former governor of North Carolina, is potentially jumping in this race. And we know that if Roy Cooper jumps in this race, this could be dangerous for the Republicans. This could be very dangerous. I'm going to show you some data real quick when it comes to this. So, granted, North Carolina voted for the Democrat governor by 15 points in 2024. Part of that was because Mark Robinson was on the ballot. But let's go back to 2016. 2016, Roy Cooper won a very, very tight election by roughly 11,000 votes. He won this election here. At the same time, when President Trump won the state of North Carolina, oops, that's the Senate. Well, I guess we can look at everything. Donald Trump won the state of North Carolina by almost 4 points. At the very same time that, is it Bill Burr, I think? No, Richard Burr won re-election in the state by 6 points. And a Democrat still was able to win at the gubernatorial level. Okay, fast forward to 2020. You think maybe, okay, it was maybe a fluke. Nope. He not only won in 2020, Roy Cooper was able to expand his margin of victory by almost 4 points. Almost 4 points he was able to expand his margin of victory and won re-election in 2020. At the same time, like we said, Thom Tillis won re-election by 1.5 points in North Carolina. Trump won the state of North Carolina by 1.3 percentage points. We obviously know that Roy Cooper knows how to win. He knows how to win in a lean red state. He knows how to win. And looking at the hypothetical polling, granted, this is why I talked about the hypothetical polling from 2020 earlier, because it doesn't always mean anything at the end of the day. But I think it can show either a dissatisfaction with the GOP, and you have to look at the crosstabs of the specific polls to see, where is support breaking from Thom Tillis. Are you seeing it with independents? Is it with the Republican base? Because then you can kind of make some educated guesses when the general election comes around, because I don't think Republicans are going to choose to vote for a Democrat just to stick it to Thom Tillis. They're going to come home at the end of the day. But you can see here, over about a year and a half out, you can see Tillis really neck and neck with Roy Cooper, potentially down, 4 percentage points in public policy polling? Potentially. But this was one of the bigger ones that we wanted to look at. That was really something that I found very, very, not amazing, but kind of shocking. Let's look. Oh, and this probably isn't the right one. Let's see. Which one? Oh, shoot. We did it. Let's see. 2026 North Carolina Senate race. Sorry about that. But there's some very interesting data that we were able to pull out of here when it comes to Laura, right here, Victory Insights. Laura Trump running ahead of Thom Tillis in a hypothetical poll for the primary with about 800 likely voters. Laura Trump getting 65%. Guys, this is a legit poll. In that same poll, you go and look at a head-to-head matchup. Tillis is only down a point. Granted, that's actually the closest poll that you have between all of these here. And Laura Trump actually turns out to be down 2 points in that same poll. So, just something to consider. You want to talk about the censure of Thom Tillis? You want to talk about how maybe the Republicans are not very fond of him? I think that's a fair assessment. I think that is a very fair assessment to say that they're not. But we know that the National Senatorial Republican Committee, chaired by Tim Scott, they're going to pour a lot of money into this race. We know the Republicans want to get to a 55-seat majority. That is their goal. Where does that run through? It runs through places like North Carolina. You have to hold North Carolina, especially with what happened in New Hampshire with Chris Sununu announcing he's not going to run. You have to hold North Carolina. That means you have to flip Georgia, which I think is the most probable of the states to flip, is Georgia. And you have to win Michigan. Mike Rogers, granted, is he going to be I don't think he's my favorite person in the world. He's not going to be my first pick probably, but ultimately based on who else is in this race, I don't know. I don't know. And I know there's a lot of people who they think that he's a rhino, yada, yada, yada. Look, no politician is perfect. But at the end of the day, Tudor Dixon just isn't going to win in Michigan. John James is running. I think John James would have been a good candidate, but he's running for governor. We have to be realistic here. The amount of the quality candidates that have been that could potentially run are split between the governor's race and the Senate race. You just have to accept the reality of that situation. But the Republicans need to get to 55 seats. They need to. And this is how they do it. And with Chris Pappas most likely going to be the nominee for the Democrats in New Hampshire, and then you're going to have Scott Brown on the Republican side, I think there's maybe some opportunity here, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough without Sununu in that race. We know Sununu knew how to run ahead of Republicans. Like, just look at this. This is one of my favorite things to look at. Look at this. Sununu won by 31 points in New Hampshire in 2020. At the same time, at the presidential level, it voted for Biden by like 7 points. And then it also voted for the Senator, Jaheen Shaheen, by like 16 points. You're talking about, you want to talk about someone who could win in a Democrat's leaning seat or state? There you have it. There you have it. And we're looking at the same things when it comes to Georgia and North Carolina. That's exactly what we're looking at. So I appreciate you guys tuning in today. That is going to wrap things up for today. Don't forget to drop down below, hit that subscribe button. That is the best way to support our channel, help us grow, help us reach new audiences. We'd really appreciate if you could drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and we will catch you next time.